Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. We have our monthly special guest, one of our most vaunted and trusted guests, Mr. Derek Johnson, to join us on said podcast. As you can see, he's joining us from a rare sighting, a recording studio, which I'm sure he will talk about, and the special lighting that surrounds him accordingly. We're going to get his musings on all things political and financial as we are the climax of this movement from one side to the next, and his knowledge and insight becomes critical thereof. If you are new to the podcast, please do like, subscribe, and share as it helps the channel grow and others gain in the knowledge you are constantly afforded. As you know, Derek is a retired Army veteran, singer, songwriter, producer, musician, of course, and also has a well-selling book, The Midnight Rider Rides Again, working on part 2. And we'll talk about that with him at the end of the podcast. Derek, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today, good sir?
Doing all right. I didn't plan this, by the way. I said no one would believe that. I walked right in the studio and on the floor and opened my laptop and voila. So yeah. So it's great to be here. This is iconic floor right here. This is where Hank Williams Jr. recorded Family Tradition. And a lot of people think Nashville. It's Muscle Shoals, Alabama. This is the original studio for Lionel Richie. This is where he started everything.
Wow.
All the Commodores. That they built the studio specifically for Lionel Richie and the Commodores. It was never an outsourced studio until they got later on into the 70s and the 80s. But Lionel Richie and the Commodores right here. And then when they started outsourcing, they brought in Roy Orbison, Hank Williams Jr., a bunch of people have recorded on this same floor. So it's really cool. I love history like that.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine bought this place, and the person who was going to buy it was going to gut it, and all this was going to be gone. And he couldn't stand to see it, history gutted like that. So he saved it from that. And so a lot of people record here, though. Sammy Kershaw now, Daryl Worley, different people. So cool place to be.
Oh, it's impressive, and I can, as an artist, relate to what you're talking about because here in California, I recorded once years ago at a place called Cornerstone, which is in Hollywood, and you had, like you said, it's a place that Derek, you're in, and you can feel the indwelling of the history that preceded you in the room, and all that residue kind of rubs off on the music you're doing. In this particular studio, we had Toto and Queen, we had Pink Floyd, Elton John, Don Henley and Hornsby did End of the Innocents. Bruce had to put his piano out right on the outside of the studio because it was too long to fit in there. So those little studio quirks that not everybody knows about. So I can relate to what you're talking about. It's an exciting opportunity when you get to record in a place like that. So kudos to you and to those folks that you're that you're working with a new record. So switching just to another subject that's a passion for you, obviously, and you're obviously clearly good at, geopolitical on that side. We had the recent State of the Union that everybody's talking about. There were comms within comms about that. So I'm going to just let you run with that. What was the biggest takeaways that you got out of his speech? And what were things that you think were encouraging from that you can pass on to the audience today?
Well, the biggest thing that people still need to realize is, and I know it gets tiring to some people, but and people are probably tired of hearing it. But this is an operation. It's a strategic operation. Um, Even a year or two back, when you're on like, it's the same thing with military, and a lot of people don't know this because a lot of people weren't military. But when you're a frontline person or you're lower rank, whichever word you are, you never know what the higher ranks are doing. You don't know what the orders are going to be when they come down. You just take them and you go, and everybody in their place is doing what they're supposed to be doing, kind of like an ant bed. I mean, that's why they used to sell those little glass packages you could buy where you could put ant bed in it and you could see their tunnels and how they build and operate. Well, it's the same thing. Everybody has a role, and I get it. I see messages and comments where people are, it sounds like you guys just keep saying stuff to keep dragging everybody along. I'm like, no, the difference in me and everybody else, and I'm not knocking everybody else, but the difference in me is I am a veteran, and I'm showing you the unique laws and orders that are put together that make up a unique scenario, unique operation. Now, on the surface, 2 years ago, year ago even, I would have thought that by then they pull the mask off and show everybody, but they are truly cleaning out everything, every facet, every intricate detail from top to bottom. Complete overhaul, as the saying is. And what I'm gonna do, I told people this last week when I was in Orlando speaking. I said, what I'm gonna do is start carrying around a blank piece of paper, and I'm gonna be 100 times worse than Elon. You ain't gonna be no 5 bullet points. 5 bullet points are easy, especially for people who are 40, 50, 60 years old and been working in this for years. 5 bullet points should be easy if you're passionate and know what you're doing. No, what I'm gonna do is take a blank piece of paper and I say, I want a full page, front and back, of what you would do simultaneous, all these operations. So whoever you are out there, I tell people, I want trafficking. How are we going to end all forms of trafficking? How are we going to take out all the cartels? All right. How are you going to launch operations with opioid crisis, fentanyl, and all the other things? Also, how are you going to reset the currency without crashing anything? How are you going to? I want every facet that they have done, every facet. I want to paper what you'd have done differently. So no, we're not just saying stuff to keep you. I'm not, and I know John's not, but him having me here, I'm not doing that. There is unique laws and orders in place that show we are still in operation. Now we're in a different phase of it, and we're going into that golden age that President Trump talks about. But it's genius when you do know the laws and orders.
Fort Knox is about to be audited, and that's imminent. And you're going to see that gold reserves are little to none. What do you think that'll do to the price of gold? And with silver being ransacked with COMEX on the markets, that's sure to follow as well. The only question is, are you going to take action or not? If you haven't, what are you waiting for? And if you have, please take a moment to visit one of our great sponsors here below, the link in the description, and call for the information. It's free. The consultation is free. The cost of not taking advantage of this has lasting consequences, folks. Please tell them John and Chris sent you. You'll be more than happy that you did.
Because every speech that President Trump does, no matter what it is laced with everything that I can go, all right, well, that right there, what he just said goes to this law. That right there goes to this executive order. That right there is this. And it's genius another way, more humorful, because President Trump played everybody for a fool last week when they had that little meeting with Zelensky. Everybody needs to realize this is all theatrics. None of that's real time. So it goes back to this. There's two ways to listen to President Trump speak. One is you're still asleep and or on the fence, and you haven't fully grasped all the laws and orders in place and what those mean, meaning a special operation, meaning a strategic operation. And you still hear a lot of stuff that mainstream media can do. Or you know the laws and orders like I do, and you hear it from a whole different standpoint because that little meeting with Zelensky's already been done. All this stuff's already been taken care of. And what I've shown people is every time he does something like that, within a week, especially a week, it's normally from a day to a week, the answer's right there. So all those liberals that lost their mind with President Trump and, oh, Zelensky stood up to the orange man. No. Did you listen what he said in the speech to the union? He said specifically, I'm doing the best one first, but and the biggest one, but he said, oh, and by the way, I got a message that he wants to do the deal. The very deal that he talked about that, oh, little, I call him Zacchaeus. So I remember Zacchaeus in the Bible, like the wee man, the wee little man, right? Well, that's what everybody calls little man Zelensky up next to President Trump, little man. Well, it's the same deal. So all these liberals, President Trump got them stirred up. Well, what it does is it shows still who's going to abide by the laws and orders up here, your governors, your judges. So anybody who got bold and said something right now against President Trump, they know who they are. See, it still goes back to a foundation. Laws and orders are written as neutral as possible. They're not supposed to be partisan. Oh, this law's for this person and this law's for this. No, it's neutral as possible. So when you have someone who's still way over here not wanting to do what's neutral for the better good of everybody, then when you have someone over here, it smokes them out. it still shows, and it shows you the people who are following along, who care, who need to know. So when he said he wants to do the deal, he also threw in there that Russia's ready for a peace deal as well. But the thing to keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, again, is this: if Russia were the bad guys, there's 2 or 3 things if they were the bad guys, if they were invading by true invasion terminology and verbiage, it wouldn't have been Ukraine at the table. It'd have been Russia at the table. It wouldn't be Ukraine. All right. The other thing, they made Joe Biden quote that whole time way back Article 5 of the NATO Constitution. Article 5 says an attack on one is an attack on all. How come all the other NATO countries weren't rushing to the aid of Ukraine? And President Trump dropped that in there big time. He said all the European nations are spending more money on Russian oil than they are helping Ukraine. I mean, that right there is your mic drop, because I've tried to tell people, you weren't there. You have not seen a dime of your money go to Ukraine. That's all theatrics. You ain't seen no wire transfer. You haven't seen the actual transferring of those funds. All that was to keep you distracted if you weren't reading what you're supposed to read. So that's your biggest one from the takeaway. The other little things are they're not minuscule, they're big. He mentioned stuff about the digital bill of rights. He just didn't say it that way. He had Melania sitting there with 2 young females, and he was talking about how her picture had been all over the internet. That ties into the 1798 Aliens Act that he's talked about, that he's invoking. Well, this is how it shows when people are reading. The 1798 Aliens Act is not just an Aliens Act. It's got 4 different laws in the one act. And 2 of the laws, one's a pro and it shows like a for and against, and one's a for and against. So like a positive and a negative, positive, negative. So it's really 2 laws, but they call it 4. But the second law is the Sedition Act. See, and it ties with that. So the Sedition Act in 1798 was like people who write stuff they're not supposed to be writing about, publications, podcasters, etc. That's why I've been telling podcasters, you better get with the program, because they're going to be looking at all these different. They can't just have everybody and anybody who wants to be a face and a name telling people. So that's why I've been telling people who follow me, I'm like, look, I'm not saying it just to follow me, but I'm a retired veteran who got put in a position to do what I'm doing in another manner. Like, so there's a big difference in that. So there is a difference in what people are giving you. And so President Trump, laws and orders, that whole speech the other evening, he said, we're a nation of laws and orders, law enforcement, laws and orders. So he said a few things in there that were big, but it's still the same stuff he's been saying, because it's consistency, it's repetition. He mentioned the pause again in another kind of manner. He's doing them in different ways now, but all these pause on tariffs, it's still the same pause. It's still the SEC.gov. So that's really what's been going on. But the biggest takeaway the other evening was, Ukraine. All the liberals went crazy. He said he could end that in 24 hours. They went crazy over that. But the ones who get it. You can't just stop something that's been going on for well over. You could make an argument back to 1991, but 2014 is when the Ukraine-Russia war really started. So, again, if Russia were the bad guys, it wouldn't be Ukraine at the table. So it's showing that things have been reset. It's also showing that there are going to be investigations that are shown somewhere down the road when people are. I know that we're ready for it and you're ready for it, most of the audience, but you got to still look at the majority of Americans where they are. The majority of Americans are at football games, basketball games. They don't care about laws and orders like that. They want me and you to do it. And again, it's that spoon-fed answer. Will they appreciate it? It's the problem. That's where I think it's still scary for us. When you think about maintaining, sustaining on into when we're in our 70s and 80s, I don't know. These young generations don't look like they're ready to take on the world, and even the clean out process, even having a clean slate. will they know what to do with it? So that's why they have to drag out stuff in another manner, because you got to get people's attention somehow. I don't know, but for the ones paying attention, that's where you pat yourself on the back and kudos that you're awake, fully awake. But it states that you have to wait, but they got to get people's attention, and I don't know what else could do it at this point. But there will be justice served. And President Trump has alluded to that they're going to be investigating. That was the other big thing, Social Security. People think that Social Security just a dead people. That money was going to people behind those dead people. A lot of those dead people were made up. So when you do the math on that, if you just take an average of $2,000 a month, there were about 7.8 million people from 110 years old to 360. If you do your math, it's 41 billion a month, 4.9 trillion a year alone, just on Social Security and dead people. So there's probably, I don't know what the number would be, probably just a 16th or maybe not a third, but probably a 16th of our deficit. But still, when you think of that alone, that one little intricate facet, $5 trillion was going to dead people. Now, President Trump said in the State of the Union, he said, we're going to find out where it was going, and it's not going to be pretty. So we know that most of those are congressmen and women, lobbyists, the big names. So, this stuff takes time, though. I mean, you think about every intricate facet. They've already shown where Maxine Waters was sending money to her daughter, the campaign money she was getting. She was funneling that to her daughter. I think almost $200,000. But again, that, what money you don't use in a campaign is supposed to go back to it, unless the people say they don't want to, say, oh, you keep it. There's a lot of stipulations around that, but it ain't to be going, hey, honey, you need some extra spending money.
You're right. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Derek. Always good. Is very, very insightful, articulate explanation as per usual. And we're going to talk about the money part of it, as always do, towards the end. We'll save one of the best for last. But I do have a question in a minute that leads up to that, or is a nice segue. So there was other comms that I heard too. I'm sure you heard. This isn't so much a question, just more of a response to what you said, leading to the question, which would be, he talked about the Middle East, a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and that was going to get revealed. He talked a lot about Democrats are never satisfied, and he could cure cancer and other things. And that to me was a comm about some of the healing cures that are coming out. You've got the World's Fair coming out in just a couple months from now. So there's a lot of, as you say, comms within the comms. There's many, many other things we could be here all day talking about. But one of the things you alluded to in your discussion a moment ago, which I think is a good setup question for part two, would be talking about the peace deal in 24 hours with Ukraine. It would seem to me, Derek, I'm really curious to get your insight. I'm sure much of the audience would be as well. At first, I thought, well, maybe he's going to do them individually. First Ukraine, then the Middle East, then China, Taiwan, and then Israel saved for last. It seems to be, and that's why I'm going to get your take on it, that maybe now he's going to kind of do them all in a row, domino effect simultaneously. You've got Iran talking about, strikes. You got Israel that's ginned up 400,000 troops to the border of Iran per Kim Clements when things seem at their worst, prophecy that we know is going to come to pass. What are your insights on that as far as the peace deals is he going to make? Do you think he's going to make them separately or going to kind of run them in a row quickly, one by one, to show how quickly he can get things done?
Yeah, I would think so, because again, a lot of the stuff, the first thing people need to realize is you can't eradicate evil. All right. So, but you got to believe that this is a God divine time period, because again, like I tell people, on a piece of paper, what would you do differently? I mean, they have managed to reset the currency. That's already happened. We already know that. You and I know this stuff. All this stuff's already taken place. It's just a matter of rolling things out for people to appreciate it. Middle East is a big, and I'm not knocking Taiwan and China, and I'm not knocking Ukraine, Russia, but I mean, Middle East is a big deal because of God and Christ, and what the Bible talks about with Israel. It's a big deal. So when he talks about the Abraham Accords and all the nations that have come together, you know, Israel, Iran, this stuff's already been in army publications way back. And it started hitting mainstream media what we were spending for subterranean warfare in 2018. Then the army publications show Hamas, the Gaza Hamas cross-border, well, Egypt Hamas, you know, all that in our army publication, 2019. All right. Now, the army publication was a war college, so that was telling you what they were already teaching our commanders. All right, what was coming. That's very key, ladies and gentlemen, because it's the officer side who are, you know, up here writing the orders, and then they're the delegators. Then you have your enlisted side who are taking from this side the orders and then putting those into action, all the way down to your lowest level private. So that's why it's very important that one publication was from a war college. So it shows you what they were showing our commanders. All right, and the bigger unified, excuse me, unified combatant commands. All right, so there's 11 of those. Well, top down. All right. So I don't know. I think that maybe, you know, you got to be careful saying this stuff because again, with the whole goal is to convert as many people as possible to common sense, patriot party. Leave all this partisan stuff and, you know, like break free from all this stuff. It was never supposed to look like this. I do believe we will still have parties, but it wasn't supposed to look like this. It's supposed to look like our foundation when you had the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. They still loved America and wanted a free America, free society, liberty, life, justice, etc. They weren't so different that they'd hate each other and try to stone each other for having a completely different thought process, or try to ostracize you or alienate you. So I think it's important to note that first because it's not a flex for President Trump. It's nothing like that. He's the face of it. And so the whole Ukraine Russia thing. First off, I'm one of those literal people too, to where I'm like, all right, has it been a full 24 hours? It's he had one conversation. So if we're counting by 24 hours, they're looking at it as a day. He's talking about the actual process of negotiations, the time. It's kind of like when you're writing a song, people say, how long did it take you to write it? I'm like 45 minutes, but it actually was like 3 days. But the time that I worked on it, I didn't work on it all day, every day. So, you know, that could be trickery to some people, but Middle East, you know, it's still going to have to be some of these nations, again, have to be sovereign on their own. So America needs to realize that we are not the world's police. As President Trump said, we're not the world's police. We're not going to be policing the world anymore. Europe has already been alerted that we're not participating in any, you know, European training exercises anymore, and that they're going to have to front $867 billion, I believe it is, for their defense. So that is part of that. Now, that plays into all this from the standpoint of, look, in a 20 years ago, Europe would have panicked. It would have been a pandemonium because they relied on us. And that was that system, that deep state swamp system, right? So them not panicking, ladies and gentlemen, also shows clean out because, again, it was all about every nation being a sovereign nation on their own. So Taiwan and China, we'll start with it first. In the speech, he said that Taiwan had invested, I think, $165 billion into semiconductor, so the chips. All right. Well, they had Joe Biden talk about the chips way back. And if you listen carefully to that quote unquote debate, if you listen carefully, Biden was hammering President Trump saying that he sent all our jobs overseas. President Trump never sent any jobs overseas, ever, not one time. But then what was key about that was as soon as he said that he went to South Korea, right, to get them to build chips. So that was an oxymoron. It's like, okay, so you're sitting here hammering President Trump, but then you went to South Korea to get them to build chips. Like you just negated your whole sentence. So that was a calm for everybody to realize this is all distraction. And that fast forward, President Trump just a few days ago, March the 4th, right? So he's saying that Taiwan is building their plants here, they're going to be doing their chips in America. All right. So that right there shows you that the deal between Taiwan and China is already done because here we are siding with Taiwan. All right. So Taiwan, you know, you look at the map, Taiwan looks like Hawaii compared to the rest of the continental United States. It's a, you know, when you look at Taiwan versus China, so that tells you right there alone that China's not going to do anything. China's going to be on board with what we're doing, but still, again, independent, sovereign on their own, which is what the Indo-Pacific Agreement's all about back in 2019, is every nation will be independent, sovereign on their own, meaning everybody's going through a reset. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, everybody went through a currency reset everywhere. Their currency, our currency. You know this, and it probably ties into what we're talking about, but I'll dip into it really quick. But ladies and gentlemen,
Please.
like when you pull out a dollar and you look at a number on a dollar, it's a serial number on there that we got to account for. You and your taxpayer dollar paid for it. So imagine the dollar being exchanged between two different countries that don't ever come back to accountability of our country. That's how bad we got, and that's what's going on. So the Taiwan deal shows that that's already been done. Now, President Trump, even though this was theater too, but way back in 2020, right before COVID, you'll remember this at the State of the Union address on February 4th, 2020, he told everybody, he said, I have a deal they've never seen, a trade deal. Well, that never was unveiled because of COVID, right? But it still shows you, he talks about President Xi all in good form. He says, I have a great relationship. So there's a big difference, ladies and gentlemen, in the Chinese Communist Party and then China. All right. So you got to remember that every nation has had their deep state. All right. So President Trump says that. So the Taiwan thing shows that both sides, that's great. Ukraine, Russia, he said in that speech, he said, Ukraine's ready to make the deal that he talked about that got all the liberals stirred up, right? Made it look like Wee Man wasn't going to do it. Well, Wee Man, President Trump said, sent me a message right before I walked in here, even though I know that that's all theater. But for the people that don't know that, he's ready, Russia's ready. So then it leaves the Middle East. So all that's already been done. And whether they do it all in one, you know, maybe to get people's attention, maybe a domino effect. I don't know. I mean, we're going to see. I'm not a part of that strategic plan up here of how they're going to do it, you know, but it's already been done though, as far as like knowing that it is a strategic operation. But Israel was the big one because, you know, all the tunnels, all the trafficking going on there. I'm not the greatest with the language and the verbiage on Hebrew. I know plenty who are, but when you start dealing with the Palestinians and you start dealing with the Israelis, you start dealing with, I mean, that's stuff that I try to steer away from just because I prefer someone like Siggy Flicker and other people that I know talk about it because they are Jewish and they are from those regions. But that still isn't, it's still biblical. And that does show you that this thing, when President Trump moved the capital to Jerusalem back in December the 6th, 2017, that's when I told my family then, I said, whoop, I said, we just went to a whole other notch of this operation. I already knew it was an operation. I'm like, that right there shows you this is a God divine operation. And that's going to take precedent first over anything else because God says in his word that any nation against Israel will be smited, will be damned. So what's going on there is obviously the precedent. It's the most popular to me. So Iran, I wouldn't be surprised if there are more like optics around, you know, maybe wiping out more of their facilities and things of that nature. It's Iran who chants death to Israel and death to the United States. But what people need to realize is that's not President Trump starting a war. That stuff's been going on for years. All right. So what Israel's doing, it's mainly Israel doing it, but they did take out a compound. What's that been about 2 or 3 months back now? Nuclear underground facility. But again, you know, will it all happen all at once or will it be a domino? People need to realize all this stuff's already happened. It's just a rolling out process. And I don't know. I mean, I think people are whoever's awake, they're as awake as they're going to be. And the people who aren't are as whatever they are. it's hard to get people to read and study the special operations part of it. That's the hardest part. But I don't know. We'll see. And as you said, the health and all the other stuff that's popping up, those are all big comms to you into what's going to take place, what's been in our food. President Trump had that tweeted not long ago about cleaner air and all the other things. So yeah, it's but you can't panic people that way either, because there are a group of normals out there that would panic in another way. If you dumped it all on them at once and say, hey, your air's poisoned and here's the patent on it and here's this, some of them would go, y'all been doing this the whole time and you haven't. So see, it's got to be delicate, because you don't want President Trump and all the good guys to be painted in oh, you've been doing the whole time and y'all haven't done. So it has to be done the right kind of way, to still keep civil peace, no civil disturbances, and no world disturbances. Because I could see that happening if they did it the wrong way, but they're not. It's all going to be unveiled, and still, God's guiding these people, all of them. He's guiding me. He's guiding everybody at our level where we're at and what we're doing. So I got this all planned a perfect way, but just got to wait for it. It's unfortunate, but what's fortunate about it, man, I mean, seriously, they've cleaned every facet, top to bottom.
Yeah.
Every bit of it.
100%.
Gotta wait.
Yeah. And, God governs our channel too, as you know. That's partly why you're here. Thank goodness, to reinforce that. And just to back up a couple of your points, Derek, going back to your first point about the ants, Proverbs talks about it, as look at the ants. They have no governance, yet they have a very assigned mission that they carry out from start to finish. So even Proverbs supports that. You'll also note back in August of 2020, optically speaking, when President Trump and then Pompeo went to the Indo-Asia Pacific Summit and invested, I should say, almost $1 trillion Federal Reserve dollars to Vietnam. Why would they do that? Unless they already were making deals back then that are now, optically, to your point, coming to light, just to back up what you were saying. And I'm glad you brought up the peace accord, because yes, Israel being saved for last, Middle East, I agree, is arguably the most important from a biblical, faith, and financial standpoint. It governs so many other touch points. So you're 100% right about that, which is a nice transition, Derek, into my third and final question for today, which we said save the quote unquote best for last on the financial side. I'd like to show you a couple of slides, if I may, and I'm going to show you all at once, and then you can just kind of, articulate your points on that. So let me start with this. This is the U.S. debt clock. I'm sure you're well familiar. Let me know when you can see this. So this is Musk doing, as you know. There's in our faith, there's a good and bad side. Ephesians 6:12 says that quite well, as you're aware. But there's also a good and bad side. With the financial side, there's a debt to credit, right? We're going from the corporation to the Constitution. And the money, as you know, has to govern that. I'm just doing a reprise here for everybody. So this is new tabs that Elon has put in under the U.S. debt clock. Federal Reserve interest, savings instead of expense per taxpayer, total interest savings, savings per taxpayer, which will be coming back to the people. We already know that he squashed the Federal Reserve into the Treasury in 2020 during COVID, and now it's going to come optically to light. To your point earlier, it's all been done. Now an income tax-free future, right? So you can see that reversing back. We take that and we juxtapose that, Derek, against this next slide, which complements things quite well. And this has regards to the M2 money supply and the paper to gold ratio and the dollar to crypto ratio. You can see here, if we were to use gold to pay off debt, it would be almost 137,000 an ounce, which would put it out of reach for most people. So that won't happen because, as you know, President Trump said the actual debt, right, more to be precise, Elon, through Trump, said out of that 36 trillion, the actual debt to Americans, consumer debt I'm talking about, is about 10 billion, which is rather modest in comparison to all the other fraud and waste you alluded to earlier. So you see the M2 money supply is radically different than it was just 25 years ago, all leading to the total hidden wealth. You have Doge draining all the corporation, all the Department of Education and the Consumer Protection Agency, which nobody really knows what they do anyway, right? Or the average person, of course. So you have all these tranches. You have China, who's amassing gold. They have to pay back, as Trump said, the minimum of 10 trillion owed. You saw Missouri, I don't know if you saw, they just won a case against the COVID against China for the bioweapon we already know about to the tune of 24 billion. If you have 50 states averaging 25 billion in settlements, that's 1.25 trillion minimum that's coming back. And you can see it amalgamating and accruing here in the wealth per citizen at almost 500,000, which we know undoubtedly will be much higher going forward in the days and weeks ahead. So the other last slide I want to show you is this here from President Trump. And I'm going to just, if you bear with me a second, I'm going to cue up the sound so that we can actually hear it. Just bear with me a moment, Derek. Technology is so much fun. Okay, that's that. So I'm going to play this clip. This from President Trump on Air Force One the other day, talking about the tariffs and the effects that they will have on said economy.
All I know is this: we're going to take in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, and we're going to become so rich, you're not going to know where to spend all that money. I'm telling you, you just watch. We're going to have jobs. We're going to have open factories. It's going to be great.
Okay, so you're, I'm sure, familiar with that one. So parsing this all together, Derek, as I did in one sort of bowl, if you will, it seems like what he's doing, as you said, it was all done behind the scenes. Is now it's just leaking out, front of scenes systematically. It seems like he's going to do his the deal stuff from the 80s, where he reset his businesses in the early 90s by bankrupting and then resetting them. He used that as a test pilot, ultimately for 30 plus years later now, with BRICS, and basically he's going to take off the tariffs and the sanctions in order to get better deals for the currencies, namely the dollar against the BRICS, so that everybody can be nationalized and compete fairly in an even level playing field. What do you see from what I share with you from the debt clock, coupled with what he just said on Fox? Does that seem to ring true to you from what you know from behind the scenes?
Well, yeah, and here's unconventional way of tying this in. One, like I tell people, Declaration of Independence, that gives us the authority to overthrow, offset such government that goes what? Long train of abuses. It's like I try to teach people is this: look, you delegate law enforcement, you delegate representatives, but see, people lost their way along the way. And so it's like a lot of people are going, well, get it done, no. It's like Tom Homan said, now, I don't give a dang what you think about me, but there's also going to be a level of respect that we are getting it done, but you also have a responsibility yourself. You're not going to come in here waving a wand around and tell all of us that knows what's going on to get it done, when you also have the main responsibility to know that it's been done. See, that's the other thing. When it's been done, and we're on the flip side, to maintain and sustain that to where we don't ever get here again, your responsibility as Americans are to know as much as you can. Now, are people going to know what I know in the sense of retain everything that I retain? No, not everybody. Will you be able to fluently discuss it like I do? Not everybody, but you can try. It's like I tell people, if you'll read and study at the end of the day, and then give just 10% more bonus extra at the end of the day. But, until then, this whole business, get it done, it's getting done. It's already been done. All right. But what's awesome about this for President Trump, because he is the face of it, and he's brilliant. He's not just the face either. He's the face and he's an operator. But there's multiple people back here that's made this happen: the generals, world leaders, and leaders. All right. They've all been playing a role, a lot of them, not all of them. Some of them were bad people that they had to get out. But a lot have been playing a role as well. That's why I kept telling people, stop trying to figure out who's good and bad. There's an operation going on. When you learn the laws and orders first, until then, you won't be able to see the special operation. A special operation by unconventional warfare. Unconventional warfare, ladies and gentlemen, is the overthrowing of a government. That's exactly what the definition is under the Special Operations Command. All right, you go over and look at the definition: overthrowing a government and or an occupying power. All right, that is what they've done without involving you. They've got everybody and all the secret military, all the different people like me who have been working behind us. You don't have to be in a uniform to be a special operator. All right, so all the top to the bottom, everybody has a role to play, and we're all doing that. All right, but that's why I tell people, you got to understand special operations first, somewhat, some details of it. Go study it. Irregular warfare, clandestine operations, covert operations. Study those as much as you can, and you're going to learn a little bit more about the military that you didn't realize. So I say that to say, because it's important. Because President Trump, there on the aircraft, most people won't even get up and walk around on a normal aircraft. He's just chilling up there going, you're going to have billions and billions. You won't know what to do with it. All right. He's showing you that that's already been done. What we were just talking about a while ago, all your resets, your currency reevaluate, all this stuff's already been done. All right. Now we're getting into the other phase of the applicability of it. Parts there, a buddy of mine, I don't have my phone on me, but we text back and forth. Nicholas Ragone, I mean, to me, I know a lot of financial gurus. I got a buddy who's writing a book right now. I told him, I'm like, dude, if you write the book, I'll forward it and blast it. Financial gurus. Those two are my go-to guys. I got two financial gurus that I go to all the time. He's the one that sent me those photos because I had not seen it that day. And, but that alone right there shows you that they have gone in and it's like in business, you probably know this, a hostile takeover. A lot of people don't realize ladies and gentlemen, you could create a product or service, build it up, have a board of trustees. You can have everything, CFO, COO, you name it, right? And then when you go public and all these other things, you could have someone come in and buy your company. It's called a hostile takeover. They could come in and buy you out, your baby, as they call it. They could come in there and go, well, you're worth this. I'm going to do this. And it's a long process. Don't have time to talk about it. But that's basically what President Trump and them have done to the federal government. They go in and go, you guys are a bunch of you're crooks and waste. You don't know what the heck you're doing. You're incompetent. Get the heck out of here. They come in there. They overtake it. And President Trump knows exactly what to do with the market. He knew what to do with all the markets. And it's like the people who do know this, who was that? We were talking about this the other day. I was talking to someone and they were saying, I went back and looked. They had not even gone back and looked. In these videos, some of you are going to know what I'm talking about instantly. But he's like, I went back and I watched a video of President Trump in the early 80s talking about China, just like he talks about them now. He's like, he's always known. I'm like, yes, he's always known what to do. And something as simple as the Chinese, it's not simple. When I was doing my master's degree, that's what we learned was Chinese culture on business. If you go to China and you're doing business in China, you better learn some Chinese culture and you better follow every bit of it to the intricate detail or the deal won't be done. So if people would study cultures and origins and, basis and foundations and premises and procedures and there's things that people just don't know about. That's why it did have to look this way. All right. But that right there, those debt, all this stuff, it's been done. It's being done, the gold and whatnot. Now, people ask me all the time, and I'm like, look, I'm not the person to ask, should you invest here, do this and do that? But, your dollar's going to be worth $1 again. And then President Trump telling you right there, he's smiling and telling you, basically, it's already been done. Just relax a little bit. But the way you're going to relax again is knowing that this is a strategic operation, special operation. Know a little bit about that. And then also listen to the man you claim to love and support. He tells you all the time. And again, if you did know more of the laws and orders in votes right now, then you'd be able to listen to him a lot more with peace and comfort. But, will we all be trillionaires? No, I don't think that. But we're going to be able to do exactly what the Bible says. They're resetting the debts. You mentioned Pompeo. He did that. He said the Indo-Pacific in 2019. That was said back then. So I think it's important, though, to always show people what has been done and how they did it. We delegate people. We delegate that. We're the ones that decide who, our representatives and the House and the Senate. Our founders did that, and we've kept it going, right? So we didn't completely abolish everything and restart and rewrite and do everything. So that's what makes this so genius is when you look at every intricate detail that's been cleaned from top to bottom, they have not started a civil disturbance, not once. Sure, people are rattling and groaning and complaining here and there. But when you really think about it, no one's hit the streets. No one's going out there and acted. These riots are all part of special operations. When you go read page 11 of Special Operations Command, it talks about riots and things like that. Those are all strategic. A lot of these are strategic to wake people up. to get people going. Oh, they're burning down my city. Oh my God. Well, we got your attention. So it did not happen. So no one's rioting because they want to riot. Because we're what? We're a nation of armed individuals, armed militias, and armed forces. There ain't many people willing to go out there because they are afraid of what the rednecks, the hillbillies, the bikers, and the patriots will do. You know, I'm not an advocate of violence at all, but the Declaration of Independence is very specific that if it comes to your worst case scenario, then what happens? What happened with our founders? Tea Party. Next thing you know, they were in the streets going, all right, enough's enough. We're not going to do this anymore. And they were shooting each other over what? Taxation without representation. I mean, it wasn't like John was talking about my mama, you know, and I'm like, all right, John, one more talk, but don't you say anything. Yep. No,
Yeah.
they were like, hey, we want representation for our taxes, right? And they had to go through the soldiers who had to sail back to the king. So little things like that, we don't have to do that anymore. And so the debt, everything, it's going to be wiped clean. You know, what will it look like? But getting into that, what's scary, what you're saying, I love that point real quick. The people who are scared, the people are, oh, this is going to lead to the new world order. No, you prevent that from happening. God did give us free will. God gave us free will on this earth to do his will, not ours, his will. Remember when Christ said, let this cup pass from me. But then he said, your will be done, God. So God's will, God gave us free will.
Mm.
So that's why it does matter that we got to work on that 54% of America who are at a sixth grade education or below at reading and comprehension. When they're getting rid of the Department of Education and it gets back into the hands of families and mothers and fathers, we have got, my dad would not let me get up from the dinner table. I had to do my homework at the dinner table. And it was some old school dinner tables where no cushion on the chair, no cushion anywhere, back or butt.
Mm.
All right. And he was like, he'd show me, if it was a math problem, he'd show me how to do the problem. Then he'd walk away. He expected me to try to learn it the first time, not sit there and go over it and over and over it. He tried, said, you're not getting up from that table until all those problems are solved and they're accurate. And he would grade them just like the teacher would, right? But I had to do them all in one. That's why I am the way I am. But everybody can be the way I am if you apply the same principles. And we stop doing that. We stop being hard. My dad, I thought he was the biggest, meanest bear in the world, but I knew the biggest, meanest bear also fed me. So, you know, it's like you grew up quicker. And, you know, my grandmother and great grandmothers, they were all 15 when they got married way back in the 30s, but they were full grown women back then. Like the people back in those eras, and I was raised by that mentality. And somewhere along the way, that mentality got away. Everybody aren't farmers anymore. You know, they weren't, you know, like everything flipped in America. All right. But I was raised by all the men and women who were farming at 15 years old, you know, and had full chores and full duties. And the only survival was to put food on their, they didn't go to the grocery store to get their food. They grew all theirs. So it's like, I don't think we got to be there anymore. No, but we got to have that mentality and apply that into the principles. So God gave us free will. So when they clean this out, again, learning how we operate and function in America, legislation, knowing your role as an American, what to do and how to talk to those legislators. They're the ones who write and pass the bills, but they can't see, they wrote and passed bills all these years because the people quit caring about that. So they took the what? Law into their hands, as the saying is. They took legislation. And then what happens? All this stuff gets passed. And then the people go, I don't like that. And that, where were you the whole time? That is your role and duty as an American to go, this is how we are as a whole. John and Susie and Kathy and Tommy, we want this. And then if that majority says we want this, then that's what the legislature is supposed to write. And we got away from that. So that's why it had to be a top-down hostile takeover, if you want to look at it that way. But if you're a business person and you don't know military, then look at it as a hostile takeover. If you're military, it had to be a special operation to go, hey, I mean, 98% of 335 million people have no clue what to do, and we can't panic them. Like, we got to keep them distracted, even if they're whining, complaining, mad, and frustrated. They're not killing and and doing other things. So, had to be done this way.
Hmm.
But it's so genius when I do. I wish I could take a USB in my head and upload it into everybody, and then also think the way I think, because it would give you so much peace and comfort to know what's taking place here is going to be reciprocal down here.
Yeah.
But ain't worked that way.
Well, in a way, Derek, if it gives you any consolation, you are doing micro fractions that USB every time you do a podcast with us. It gets what's in your head ferreted out to help people. So you're definitely championing and spearheading the cause that I think is bringing a lot of uh, logic and sanity and ultimately peace to the people here listening that need it on both sides. So thank you for always doing that. As we conclude today, Derek, always last words you have for the audience, and where can people find your new book?
Well, just I encourage people to read and study just a little bit of your day. You don't have to, go hardcore and whatnot, but my books were that. Like I tell people, look, it's going to sound far-fetched when you first hear it, because if you never heard of puppet states and government exiles and all these things that have happened in history, it's going to sound far-fetched at first, because this is hopefully a once in a lifetime operation again. Even the operation that used the government and exiles and puppet states in the 40s was for a whole different kind of operation. This is a clean out of the deep state. All right. So what God gave me the ability to do was to take all this information, laws and orders, chronological order. That's what my books do. Now, if you can't afford a book, I get it. That's why I have all my platforms. I spend my time doing that. I put it all over my social media. So you'll have to piece it together. And you may even have to write your own notes. But what my books have done, the Midnight Rider 1 and 2, is take all the laws and orders that are unique to this special operation that President Trump and the generals and the world leaders are using, all right, and put it in a chronological order. It's like a workbook, but it's also like a Cliff Notes, where, yes, you should go look up all these laws and orders on your computer as you're going through the book and see that it's there, even if you don't read all 1,254 pages of the Law War Manual alone. Some of these documents that I put in there, the links to, some of them are 100, 200, 300 pages long. So it would take you forever to go through all that. So what I did is put it in a chronological and a gist of what those are. So the first book's like 216 pages. The other one's 596 pages. A lot of those are photos of clips, articles, and then not a lot of reading. The second part has more reading because I broke down Title 10 and Title 50, special operations, unconventional warfare, teach you all that, how to think like that, but then also simultaneous how President Trump and the generals pulled this off with those. All right, so that's why there was a little bit more reading in part 2, but that's the only way you're really going to be able to fully grasp everything is to go read those, because it's not my writing just because of me. I took everything that President Trump is using in the military, special forces, Title 10, Title 50. I took everything they're using and showing you what they've done, not what I've done. All right. So that's the difference in a veteran keeping their oath and showing you what they're using versus, and I'm not knocking podcasters, but there's not anybody else doing that because one, you got to be a veteran, and or you got to be a connoisseur. If you're not a veteran, you got to be a connoisseur of military law, military regulations, military orders, all things military, plus a knowledge of federal to tie it in. So there is a big gap there. But if you love President Trump and if you love the armed forces, you're going to have a whole newfound love for him and a whole newfound love for the armed forces of what they've done and pulled together. And then again, I don't mean to leave God last, but maybe I can make this as the cherry on top, but God ultimately has led this whole thing. And however you believe in God, that's up to you. Spiritual realm, whatever. But God the God of Israel put all this together. And he's inspired all these men and women on where everybody are on their levels. Everybody's where they were in their life. They heard the calling, like I heard the calling, and everybody's come together. We're all working on this together in our own ways, together and separate. But still, it is God divine. And that those books, I don't know how I did it. I look at it now. It's kind of like when you do your master's degree or something. People say, "Would you do it again?" I'm like, "No," but I probably would, but not now, right? But when you don't know that you don't know, you're going to do it because you don't have it yet, right? But when you look at those books, I'm like, "Oh man, I did. How did I put all that in the chronological?" It took time, but again, that's what they're operating with. And if you want to really know what they're doing, you got to know what they're operating with. All this other stuff's just talk. I don't make speculations. I don't make predictions. I take everything. And that's why I live daily. But I can live in peace daily because of what I read and what I know and what I know what's going on. And if you want that peace, then you got it. Now we are on the home stretch. We are going into the golden era. But I still think that President Trump and the generals and the world leaders need the respect that they deserve for answering God's calling where they were. I mean, you look at President Trump really quick. Come on, a billionaire in his 70s can play golf every day, all day, every day. I've eaten his food. It's premier. It's healthy food. All right. I've had their food. I mean, I've been to most of his properties. It's outside of Scotland and a few others, but I've been to a lot of his property. It's immaculate.
Mhm.
He lived that life he left that life every day to be hated, ridiculed, mocked, scorned, laughed at, head severed, pictured. I mean, you think of all the stuff that wasn't special operation related. Some of this is natural. Some of this are. You think of that. That man deserves the credit he deserves from a godly standpoint, not just a humanly and pat on the back, but what he took and what he sacrificed, knowing what the end goal is going to be.
Mhm.
And he only knows the end because it's God divine and also the generals and the military that's backing this. So I just think it's a way for people to find a new fond respect and love for President Trump, but also your armed forces, your special operations, and men and women that you probably will never see their face. Let's just be honest.
100%. And that's why we're glad you're here, Derek, because for those of us who weren't called to this or didn't major in it or aren't military directly, even if those of us who have family military, that's still its own animal, as you know. You're fulfilling a very important component within the movement, and we're so appreciative of that. So we'll leave those links that you always have with us, as you know, in the description. And folks, again, we're not financial advisors, nor is this constitutes financial advice, but as you know, we do have some great sponsorships, gold and silver providers that we recommend. We'll leave that link in the description. If you are looking for different currencies, dinar, dong, zim, some of the other stuff Derek mentioned, we'll also leave that in the description as well. Derek Johnson, thank you for your service. Thank you for the podcast. Thanks for taking some time out of your professional day and recording to be with us. We appreciate it, and we look forward to having you back on shortly.
Well, it's good to be here, and I think music's second now to what I've been doing. So,
Yeah.
so it's good to do this. So we'll see you soon.
Okay, brother. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.